5 On Finniston Farm by Enid Blyton. A special note from Enid Blyton. My readers may like to know that the Finniston Farm in this story is a real farm in Dorset, owned by my family, though I have, of course, changed its name in the book. The old chapel, now a storehouse for corn, is still there with, as always, a cat and its kittens on the sacks. The great old door, taken from the Norman castle, is still at the farm, used as a magnificent kitchen door. The old tiles on the barns still glow with their centuries-old growth of bright lichen, and the quaint old oven is still in the bedroom wall, complete with its iron tray and embers for the warming pan. But, as yet, I haven't found the secret entrance to the old dungeons or cellars of the long-ago burnt-down castle to which the chapel belonged. The famous 5 have been cleverer than I am. Now read the story knowing that Finniston Farm is real, just as I have described it in the book. Chapter 1. The 5 are all together again. Phew, said Julian, mopping his wet forehead. What a day. Let's go and live at the equator. It would be cool compared to this. He stood leaning on his bicycle, out of breath with a long, steep ride up a hill. Dick grinned at him. You're out of training, Ju, he said. Let's sit down for a bit and look at the view. We're pretty high up. They leaned their bicycles against a nearby gate and sat down, their backs against the lower bars. Below them spread the Dorset countryside, shimmering in the heat of the day, the distance almost lost in a blue haze. A small breeze came wandering round, and Julian sighed in relief. I'd never have come on this biking trip if I'd guessed it was going to be as hot as this, he said. Good thing Anne didn't come. She'd have given up the first day. George wouldn't have minded, said Dick. She's game enough for anything. Good old Georgina, said Julian, shutting his eyes. I'll be glad to see the girls again. Fun to be on our own, of course, but things always seem to happen when the 4 of us are together. 5, you mean, said Dick, tipping his hat over his eyes. Don't forget old Timmy. What a dog. Never knew one that had such a wet lick as Tim. I say, won't it be fun to meet them all? Don't let's forget the time, Julian. Hey, wake up, ass. If we go to sleep now, we'll not be in time to meet the girls' bus. Julian was almost asleep. Dick looked at him and laughed. Then he looked at his watch and did a little calculating. It was 2:30. Let's see now. Anne and George will be on the bus that stops at Finniston Church at 3:05, he thought. Finniston is about a mile away down this hill. I'll give Julian 15 minutes to have a nap and hope to goodness I don't fall asleep myself. He felt his own eyes closing after a minute and got up at once to walk about. The 2 girls and Tim must be met because they would have suitcases with them, which the boys planned to wheel along on their bicycles. The 5 were going to stay at a place called Finniston Farm, set on a hill above the little village of Finniston. None of them had been there before, nor even heard of it. It had all come about because George's mother had heard from an old school friend who had told her that she was taking paying guests at her farmhouse and had asked her to recommend visitors to her. George had promptly said that she would like to go there with her cousins in the summer holidays. Hope it's a decent place, thought Dick, gazing down into the valley where the cornfields waved in a little breeze. Anyway, we shall only be there for 2 weeks, and it will be fun to be together again. He looked at his watch. Time to go. He gave Julian a push. Hey, wake up. Another 10 minutes, muttered Julian, trying to turn over as if he were in bed. He rolled against the gate bars and fell onto the hard, dry earth below. He sat up in surprise. Gosh, I thought I was in bed, he said. My word, I could have gone on sleeping for hours. Well, it's time to go and meet that bus, said Dick. I've had to walk about all the time you were asleep. I was so afraid I'd go off myself. Come on, Julian, we really must go. They rode down the hill, going cautiously round the sharp corners, remembering how many times they had met herds of cows, wide farm carts, tractors and the like on their way through the great farming county. Ah, there was the village at the bottom of the hill. It looked old and peaceful and half asleep. Thank goodness it sells ginger beer and ice creams, said Dick, seeing a small shop with a big sign in the window. I feel as if I want to hang out my tongue like Timmy does. I'm so thirsty. Let's find the church and the bus stop, said Julian. I saw a spire as we rode down the hill, but it disappeared when we got near the bottom. There's the bus, said Dick, as he heard the noise of wheels rumbling along in the distance. Look, here it comes. We'll follow it. There's Anne in it, and George, look, shouted Julian. We're here exactly on time. Woohoo, George! The bus came to a stop by the old church, and out jumped Anne and George, each with a suitcase, and out leapt old Timmy too, his tongue hanging out, very glad to be out of the hot, jerky, smelly bus. There are the boys, shouted George, and waved wildly as the bus went off again. Julian, Dick, I'm so glad you're here to meet us. The 2 boys rode up and jumped off their bikes while Timmy leapt round them, barking madly. They thumped the girls on their backs and grinned at them. Just the same old sixpences, said Dick. You've got a spot on your chin, George, and why on earth have you tied your hair into a ponytail, Anne? You're not very polite, Dick, said George, bumping him with her suitcase. I can't think why Anne and I looked forward so much to seeing you again. Here, take my suitcase. Haven't you any manners? Plenty, said Dick, and grabbed the case. I just can't get over Anne's new hairdo. I don't like it. Anne, do you, Jew, ponytail? A donkey tail would suit you better, Anne. It's all right. It's just because the back of my neck was so hot, said Anne, shaking her hair free in a hurry. She hated her brothers to find fault with her. Julian gave her arm a squeeze. Nice to see you both, he said. What about some ginger beer and ice cream? There's a shop over there that sells them, and I've a sudden longing for nice, juicy plums. You haven't said a word to Timmy yet, said George, half offended. He's been trotting around you and licking your hands, and he's so dreadfully hot and thirsty. Shake paws, Tim, said Dick, and Timmy politely put up his right paw. He shook hands with Julian too, and then promptly went mad, careering about and almost knocking over a small boy on a bicycle. Come on, Tim, want an ice cream? Said Dick, laying his hand on the big dog's head. Hark at him panting, George. I bet he wishes he could unzip his hairy coat and take it off. Don't you, Tim? Woof, said Tim, and slapped his tail against Dick's bare legs. They all trooped into the ice cream shop. It was half dairy, half bakers. A small girl of about 10 came to serve them. Mum's lying down, she said. What can I get you? Ice creams, I suppose? That's what everyone wants today. "You supposed right," said Julian. "A large one each, please, 5 in all, and 4 bottles of ginger pop as well." "5 ice creams? Do you want one for that dog, then?" said the girl in surprise, looking at Timmy. "Woof," he said at once. "There you are," said Dick. He said yes. Soon the 5 were eating their cold ice creams, Timmy licking his from a saucer. Before he had had many licks, the ice cream slid from the saucer, and Timmy chased it all the way round the shop as it slid away from his vigorous licks. The little girl watched him, fascinated. "I must apologize for his manners," said Julian solemnly. "He hasn't been very well brought up." He at once had a glare from George and grinned. He opened his bottle of ginger beer. "Nice and cold," he said. "Here's a happy fortnight to us all." He drank half the glass at top speed and set it down with a great sigh. "Well, blessings on the person who invented ice cream, ginger pop, and the rest," he said. "I'd rather invent things like that any day than rockets and bombs. Ha! I feel better now. What about you others? Do you feel like going to find the farm?" "Whose farm?" asked the little girl, coming out from behind the counter to pick up Timmy's saucer. Timmy gave her a large, wet and loving lick as she bent down. "Oh," she said, pushing him away. "He looked all down my face." "Probably thought you were an ice cream," said Dick, giving her his hanky to wipe her cheek. "The farm we want is called Finniston Farm. Do you know it?" "Oh, yes," said the little girl. "You go down the village street, right to the end, and turn up the lane there, up to the right. The farmhouse is at the top of the lane. Are you staying with the Philpotts?" "Yes. Do you know them?" asked Julian, getting out some money to pay the bill. "I know the twins there," said the girl, "the 2 Harrys. At least, I don't know them well. Nobody does. They're just wrapped up in each other. They never make any friends. You look out for their old great-granddad. He's a one, he is. He once fought a mad bull and knocked it out. And his voice, you can hear it for miles. I was real scared of going near the farm when I was little. But Mrs. Philpott, she's nice. You'll like her. The twins are very good to her, and to their dad too. Work like farm hands all the holidays. You won't know t'other from which, they're so alike." "Why did you call them the 2 Harrys?" asked Anne curiously. "Oh, because they're both," began the child, and then broke off as a plump woman came bustling into the shop. "Janie, you go and see to the baby for me. I'll see to the shop now. Run along." Away went the small girl, scuttling through the door. "Little gas bag she is," said her mother. "Anything more you want?" "No, thanks," said Julian, getting up. "We must go. We're to stay at Finniston Farm, so we may be seeing you again soon. We liked the ice creams." "Oh, so you're going there, are you?" said the plump woman. "I wonder how you'll get on with the Harrys. And keep out of Grandad's way. He's over 80, but he can still give a mighty good thumping to anyone who crosses him." The 5 went out into the hot sun again. Julian grinned round at the others. "Well, shall we go and find the nice Mrs. Philpott, the unfriendly Harrys, whoever they are, and the fearsome great-granddad? Sounds an interesting household, doesn't it?" Chapter 2. Finniston Farm. The 4 children, with Timmy trotting beside them, walked down the hot, dusty village street until they came to the end, and then they saw the lane turning off to the right, just as the little girl had told them. "Wait a minute," said Anne, stopping at a curious little shop at the end of the village street. "Look, here's a queer shop. It sells antiques. Look at those old horse brasses. I'd like to get 1 or 2 of those, and just see those lovely old prints." "Oh no, not now, Anne," said Julian with a groan. "This awful sudden craze of yours for second-hand shops has been going on too long. Horse brasses, you've got stacks of them already. If you think we're going to go into that dark, smelly little shop and—" "Oh, I'm not going to go in now," said Anne hurriedly, "but it does look rather exciting. I'll come by myself sometime and prowl around." She glanced at the name on the shop front. William Finniston. How funny to have the same name as the village. I wonder if... "Oh, come on, Anne," said George impatiently, and Timmy tugged at her skirt. Anne gave one backward glance at the fascinating little shop window and hurried after the others, making up her mind to slip down to the shop one day when she was alone. They all went up the little winding lane, where red poppy heads jigged about in the breeze, and after a while they came in sight of the farmhouse. It was a big one, 3 stories high, with whitewashed walls, and the rather small windows belonging to the age in which it was built. Old-fashioned red and white roses rambled over the porch, and the old wooden door stood wide open. The 5 stood on the scrubbed stone entrance, looking into the dim hall. An old wooden chest stood there, and a carved chair. A rather threadbare rug lay on the stone floor, and a grandfather clock ticked slowly and loudly. Somewhere a dog barked, and Timmy at once barked back, "Woof, woof." "Be quiet, Timmy," said George sharply, afraid that a horde of farm dogs might come rushing out. She looked for a bell or a knocker, but couldn't see either. Then Dick spotted a beautiful wrought iron handle hanging down from the roof of the porch. Could it be a bell? He pulled it, and at once a bell jangled very loudly somewhere in the depths of the farmhouse, making them all jump. They stood in silence, waiting for someone to come. Then they heard footsteps, and 2 children came up the hallway. They were exactly alike. "The most twinny twins I've ever seen," thought Anne in amazement. Julian smiled his friendliest smile. "Good afternoon. We're the Kirins. I hope you're expecting us." The twins stared at him without a smile. They nodded together. "Come this way," they both said, and marched back down the hall. The 4 stared at one another in surprise. "Why so stiff and haughty?" whispered Dick, putting on a face exactly like the twins. Anne giggled. They all followed the twins, who were dressed exactly alike in navy shorts and navy shirts. They went right down the long hall, past a stairway, round a dark corner, and into an enormous kitchen which was obviously used as a sitting room as well. "The Kirins, Mother," said the twins together, and at once disappeared through another door, shoulder to shoulder. The children found themselves facing a pleasant-looking woman standing by a table, her hands white with flour. She smiled and then gave a little laugh. "Oh, my dears, I didn't expect you to be quite so soon. Do forgive my not being able to shake hands with you, but I was just making scones for your tea. I'm so pleased to see you. Did you have a good journey here?" It was nice to hear her welcoming voice and see her wide smile. The 5 warmed to her at once. Julian put down the suitcase he was carrying and looked around the room. "What a lovely old place," he said. "You carry on with your scone making, Mrs. Philpott. We'll look after ourselves. Just tell us where to go. It's nice of you to have us." "I'm glad to," said Mrs. Philpott. "I expect your aunt told you the farm's not doing too well, and she kindly said she'd send you here for 2 weeks. I've some other boarders too, an American and his son. so I'm pretty busy." "Well, you don't need to bother too much about us," said Dick. "In fact, we'll camp out under a haystack if you like, or in a barn. We're used to roughing it." "Well, that might be a help," said Mrs. Philpot, going on with her mixing. "I've a bedroom that would do for the girls all right, but I'm afraid you boys would have to share one with the American boy, and, well, you mightn't like him." "Oh, I expect we'll get on all right," said Julian, "but my brother and I would certainly prefer to be by ourselves, Mrs. Philpot. What about putting up camp beds or something in a barn? We'd love that." Anne looked at Mrs. Philpot's kind, tired face and felt suddenly sorry for her. How awful to have your home invaded by strangers, whether you liked them or not. She went over to her. "You tell Georgina and me anything you'd like us to do to help," she said. "You know, making the beds and dusting and things like that. We're used to doing things at home, and I'm going to enjoy having you," said Mrs. Philpot, looking round at them all, "and you won't need to help very much. The twins do a great deal, too much, I think, bless them, because they help on the farm too. Now you go up the stairs to the very top of the house, and you'll see 2 bedrooms, one on each side of the landing. The left-hand one is yours, girls. The other is where the American boy is sleeping. And as for you 2 boys, you can slip out to the barn and see if you'd like a couple of camp beds there. I'll get the twins to take you." The twins came back at this minute and stood silently, shoulder to shoulder, as alike as peas. George looked at them. "What's your name?" she said to one twin. "Harry," was the answer. She turned to the other. "And what's yours?" "Harry." "But surely you don't both have the same name?" exclaimed George. "Well, you see," explained their mother, "we called the boy Henry, and he became a Harry, of course, and we called the girl Harriet, and she calls herself Harry for short, so they're known as the Harrys." "I thought they were both boys," said Dick in amazement. "I wouldn't know which is which." "Well, they feel they have to be alike," said Mrs. Philpot, "and as Harry can't have long hair like a girl, Harriet has to have short hair to be like Harry. I often don't know one from the other myself." Dick grinned. "Funny how some girls want to be boys," he said, with a sly glance at George, who gave him a furious look. "Twins, show the Currans up to the top bedroom," said Mrs. Philpot, "and then take the boys out to the big barn. They can have the old camp beds if they like the look of the barn." "We sleep out there," said the Harrys, both together, and scowled just like George. "Well, you shouldn't," said their mother. "I told you to take your mattresses to the little room off the dairy." "It's too stuffy," said the twins. "I say, look here, we don't want to cause trouble," said Julian, feeling that the twins were too unfriendly for words. "Can't we sleep in the room off the dairy?" "Certainly not," said Mrs. Philpot, and sent the Harrys a warning glance. "There's room for you all in the big barn. Go on now, twins, do as I tell you. Take the 4 up to the top bedroom with the cases, and then out to the barn." The twins went to pick up the suitcases, still looking mutinous. Dick interposed himself between them and the cases. "We'll carry them," he said stiffly. "We don't want to be any more trouble to you than we can help." And he and Julian picked up a suitcase each and set off after the Harrys, who looked suddenly surprised. George followed with Timmy, more amused than cross. Anne went to pick up a spoon that Mrs. Philpot had dropped. "Thank you, dear," said Mrs. Philpot. "Look, don't get upset by the twins. They're a funny pair, but good at heart. They just don't like strangers in their home, that's all. Promise you won't mind them. I do want you to be happy here." Anne looked at the kindly, tired face of the woman beside her and smiled. We'll promise not to worry about the twins if you'll promise not to worry about us, she said. We can look after ourselves, you know. Honestly, we're used to it. And please, do tell us when you want anything done. She went out of the room and up the stairs. The others were already in one of the 2 bedrooms at the top of the house. It was a fairly big room, whitewashed with rather a small window and boarded floors. Julian looked at the boards he was standing on. I say, look at the wood this floor's made of. Solid old oak, worn white with the years. My word, this farmhouse must be very old. And look at the beams running across the walls and into the roof. Hey, twins, this is a fine old house of yours. The twins unbent enough to nod in time together. Seems as if you two go by the clockwork. You speak the same words at the same time. You walk in time, you nod your heads in time, said Dick. But I say, do you ever smile? The twins looked at him with dislike. Anne nudged Dick. Stop it, Dick. Don't tease them. Perhaps they'll show you the barn now. We'll unpack some clean things we've brought for you in our case and come down with them when we're ready. Right, said Dick, and he and Julian went out of the room. Opposite, with its door open, was the other room where the American boy slept. It was so very untidy that Dick couldn't help exclaiming, Gosh, how does he get his room into all that mess? He and Julian went down the stairs and Dick turned back to see if the Harrys were following. He saw them standing at the top, each shaking a furious fist at the door of the American boy's room, and what a furious look on their faces too. Phew, thought Dick, the Harrys have got some sort of hate on there. Let's hope they don't get one for us too. Well, now for the barn, he said aloud. Don't go so fast, Ju. Wait for the twins. They're just falling over themselves to look after us. Chapter 3. Out in the barn. The twins stalked out of the farmhouse and took the 2 boys round the dairy shed and up to an enormous barn. One of them pushed open the great door. I say, said Julian, gazing into the dark barn, I never saw such a fine barn in all my life. It's as old as the hills. Look at those beams soaring up into the roof. It reminds me of a cathedral somehow. I wonder why they built the roof so high. What do you store in here, twins? Sacks of meal, said the Harrys together, opening and shutting their mouths as one. The 2 boys saw a couple of camp beds in a corner of the barn. Look here, said Julian, if you really would rather sleep here alone, we'll sleep in the little room off the dairy that your mother spoke of. Before the twins could answer, a shrill barking came from the direction of the camp beds, and the boys saw a tiny black poodle there, standing up, quivering in every hair. What a tiny thing, said Julian. Is he yours, twins? What's his name? Snippet, came the answer from both at once. Come here, Snippet. At once the tiny black poodle hurled himself off the camp bed and raced over to them. He fawned on them all, barking in delight, licking everyone in turn. Dick picked him up, but the twins at once clutched Snippet to themselves. He's our dog, they said so fiercely that Dick backed away. All right, you can have him, but be careful Tim doesn't eat him, he said. A look of fear came over the faces of the Harrys, and they turned to one another anxiously. It's all right, said Julian hastily. Tim's gentle with small things. You needn't be afraid. I say, why do you have to be so dumb? It really wouldn't hurt you to be a bit friendly. And do let us sleep in your old room. We really don't mind. The twins looked at each other again, as if reading one another's thoughts, and then they turned gravely to the boys, not looking quite so unfriendly. We will all sleep here, they said. We will fetch the other camp beds. And off they marched, Snippet running excitedly at their heels. Julian scratched his head. "Those twins make me feel peculiar," he said. "I somehow don't feel they are quite real. The way they act and speak together makes me feel as if they're puppets or something." "They're just jolly rude and unfriendly," said Dick bluntly. "Oh well, they won't get in our way much. I vote we explore the farm tomorrow. It looks quite a big one, spreading out over the hill slopes everywhere. I wonder if we could get a ride on a tractor." At that moment a bell rang loudly from the direction of the house. "What's that for?" said Dick. "Tea, I hope." The twins came back at that moment with 2 more camp beds, which they proceeded to set up as far from their own as possible. Dick went to give a hand, but they waved him off and put up the beds most efficiently and quickly by themselves. "Tea is ready," they said, standing up when the beds were finished and blankets and pillows were set out on them. "We will show you where to wash." "Thanks," said Dick and Julian together, and then grinned at one another. "Better be careful," said Julian, "or we'll catch their habit of speaking exactly at the same moment. I say, isn't that poodle an amusing little fellow? Look at him stalking that jackdaw." A black jackdaw, the nape of his neck showing grey as he ran in front of a snippet, had flown down from somewhere in the roof of the barn. As Snippet danced after him, he ran behind sacks, scurried into corners, and led the little dog such a dance that the 2 boys roared. Even the twins smiled. "Jack," said the jackdaw, and rose into the air. He settled himself neatly on the middle of the poodle's back, and Snippet promptly went mad and tore about the barn at top speed. "Roll over, Snippet," shouted the Harrys, and Snippet at once flung himself on his back, but the jackdaw, with a triumphant "Jack," rose at once into the air and alighted on one twin's head. "I say, is he tame?" said Dick. "What's his name?" "Nosy. He's ours. He fell down a chimney and broke his wing," said the twins, "so we kept him till it was well, and now he won't leave us." "Gosh," said Dick, staring at them. "Did you really say all that? Or was it the jackdaw? You can talk properly after all." Nosy pecked at the twin's ear nearest to him, and the twin gave a yell. "Stop it, Nosy!" The jackdaw rose into the air with a "chack, chack, chack" that sounded very like a laugh, and disappeared somewhere in the roof. Just then the 2 girls came to find the boys in the barn sent by Mrs. Philpot, who was sure they hadn't heard the bell. Timmy was with them, and of course sniffling into every corner, enjoying the farm smells everywhere. They came to the barn and looked in. "Oh, there you are," called Anne. "Mrs. Philpot said we—" Timmy began to bark, and she stopped. He had caught sight of Snippet sniffing around the sacks, still hunting for the cheeky jackdaw. He stood still and stared. What in the wide world was that funny little black creature? He gave another loud bark and shot over towards the poodle, who gave a terrified yelp and leapt into the arms of one of the twins. "Take your dog away," said both the twins fiercely, glaring at the 4. "It's all right, he won't hurt Snippet," said George, advancing on Timmy and taking hold of his collar. "He really won't." "Take your dog away," shouted the twins, and up in the roof somewhere the jackdaw said "Chack, chack, chack," just as fiercely. All right," said George, glaring as angrily as the twins. "Come on, Tim, that poodle wouldn't be more than a mouthful for you anyway." They all went back to the farmhouse in silence, Snippet having been left behind on the camp bed belonging to one of the twins. They cheered up when they came into the big, cool kitchen. Tea was now laid on the farmhouse table, a big solid affair of old oak. Chairs were set around, and it all looked very homelike. "Hot scones," said George, lifting the lid off a dish. "I never thought I'd like hot scones on a summer's day, but these look heavenly, running with butter, just how I like them." The 4 looked at the homemade buns and biscuits and the great fruit cake. They stared at the dishes of homemade jam and the big plate of ripe plums. Then they looked at Mrs. Philpot sitting behind a very big teapot, pouring out cups of tea. "You mustn't spoil us, Mrs. Philpot," said Julian, thinking that really his hostess was doing too much. "Please don't let us make too much work for you." A loud, commanding voice suddenly made them all jump. Sitting in a big wooden armchair near the window was someone they hadn't seen, a burly old man with a shock of snowy white hair and a luxurious white beard almost down to his waist. His eyes were startlingly bright as he looked across at them. "Too much work? What's that you say? Too much work? Ha! People nowadays don't know what work is, that they don't. Grumble, 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 asking for this and expecting that. Pah! Pah, I say." Now, Grandad," said Mrs. Philpot gently, "you just sup your tea and rest. You've been out on the farm all day, and it's too much work for you." That set the old man off again. "Too much work? Now let me tell you something. When I was a young lad, Hello, who's this?" It was Timmy. He had been startled by the sudden shouting of the old man and had stood up, his hackles rising and a low growl down in his throat. And then a very curious thing happened. Timmy walked slowly over to the fierce old man, stood by him, and laid his head gently on his knee. Everyone stared in astonishment, and George could hardly believe her eyes. At first the old man took no notice. He just let Timmy stay there and went on with his shouting. "No one knows anything these days. They don't know a good sheep or a good bull or a good dog. Timmy moved his head a little, and the old man stopped again. He looked down at Timmy and patted him on the head. "Now here's a dog, a real dog, a dog that could be the best friend any man ever had. He reminds me of my old True, he does." George was staring in amazement at Timmy. "He's never done a thing like that before," she said. "All dogs are like that with old Grandad," said Mrs. Philpot softly. "Don't mind his shouting. He's like that. See, your Timmy is lying down by Grandad. Now they'll both be happy. Grandad will have his tea and be nice and quiet. Don't take any notice of him now." Still astonished, the children ate a marvellous tea and were soon talking eagerly to Mrs. Philpot, asking her questions about the farm. "Yes, of course you can go on the tractor, and we've an old Land Rover too. You can motor round the farm in that if you like. Wait till my husband comes in. He'll tell you what you can do." Nobody saw a little black shadow come in at the door and sidle softly over to Grandad. Snippet, the poodle. He had left the barn and come to the kitchen he loved. It was only when Mrs. Philpot turned round to ask the old man to have another cup of tea that she saw a very strange sight indeed. She nudged the twins, and they turned to look. They saw Timmy lying peacefully down on Grandad's big feet, and Snippet the poodle lying between Timmy's great front paws. Well, what an astonishing sight, to be sure. "Grandad's happy now," said Mrs. Philpot. "2 dogs at his feet. And now look, here's my husband. Come along in, Trevor, we're all here, the dogs as well."